In this lesson, we're going to be talking about compressors as they relate to air conditioning. Now, compressors considered one of the major system components, so we want to spend a little bit of time on that. There are many different types of compressors. We're going to talk about a few of them now because they relate directly to air conditioning, be it window units, be it rooftop, be it split systems. You will see these types of compressors. So there's 5 basic types of compressors. We have the rotary compressor, we have a scroll, we have a screw compressor, we have a centrifugal compressor, and we have a reciprocating compressor. The rotary compressors are usually very small and lightweight. They use blades or vanes to move the refrigerant. They contain an eccentric, that's an off-center rotor. This rotor rotates inside of a cylinder. The suction and the discharge ports are on opposite side, and the dome is on the high side. This is an example of the rotary compressor. Okay, so we have our discharge up on the dome. We have our low from the evaporator, our low pressure coming in the bottom. As this off-center rotor rotates, it compresses and pushes the refrigerant out through the start, through the top. There's valves up here, and forces it into the discharge at a higher pressure. The rotary compressor ports, the suction line connects directly to the compressor. The discharge line connects directly to the center of the dome, and the centrifugal force inside the compressor separates the oil from the gas. So the oil in rotary compressor systems usually does not leave the compressor with the gas. There are 2 types of rotary compressors. There's a stationary vane or blade. It has a blade and a shaft with an off-center rotor and a discharge valve. And there's a rotary vane or blade. It has 2 or more sliding vanes. The advantages of a rotary compressor: the efficiency is much higher than a reciprocating compressor. It can pull a deeper vacuum because there's no dead or unused head space. It's less apt to blow fuses on startup. The rotary compressor usually employs a check valve in the discharge side of the compressor to prevent vapor and compressor oil from flowing back to the evaporator. The next type of compressor we're going to talk about is the scroll compressor. It's the newest type of compressor. It does not have any valves. The refrigerant vapor is squeezed, thus increasing pressure. And when you think about a scroll compressor, think about a paper scroll, you know, one of the ones that's rolled up. This is a cutaway of a scroll compressor. The motor and all the drive components are here at the bottom. The scroll that squeezes the refrigerant and compresses it is here. Okay, and our suction line is here, discharge line is there. The scroll compressor has very little wear and tear. They only have 3 moving parts. It has 2 offset spiral discs that compress the vapor. The upper disc is stationary and the lower disc is driven by the motor. The driven scroll moves in an orbiting motion within the stationary disc. During operation, the vapor is trapped between the scrolls and compressed by the orbiting motion. Okay, and this is what we're talking about. Okay, so you have one stationary disc. Okay, and then as the refrigerant enters it, it is compressed by the orbiting motion. You have your stationary disc that's showing in the gray, and you have your rotating disc that's on the motor that's shown in the brown. The refrigerant enters as a low pressure and leaves as a high pressure. Scroll compressors can be sometimes noisy on startup and shut down when they're over 3 tons. Some manufacturers have installed a solenoid valve between the suction and discharge lines to equalize the pressure at shutdown. This solves some of the noise issues. The valve is wired in parallel with the contacts of the single pole contactor. Until recently, the scroll was only used in systems up to 5 tons. However, there are now scrolls in most sizes under 20 tons. Okay, this is taking apart a scroll compressor. Okay, we took a saw and a grinder wheel, and we actually cut the scroll apart. So you see the scroll compressor on the left. Now you see how the motor components are down near the base. And as we open up the top, the stationary scroll is up top, the driven scroll, but you see how they fit together in a scroll pattern. You down here, once you remove the scroll, you can actually see the off-center motor. Okay, when this rotates, it's rotating the scroll, the driven scroll, in an sort of offset, since that is not in the center. Refrigerant migration refers to the movement of liquid refrigerant to the compressor crankcase. This happens when the compressor is off and is colder than the evaporator. Violent foaming on startup results in the loss of oil from the crankcase, and it can cause severe damage to the compressor. The use of crankcase heaters and pump down controls can reduce and stop the refrigerant migration during the compressor off cycle. Okay, so in this we actually went through two types of compressors. We talked about the rotary and the scroll. We still have to talk a little bit more about the reciprocating, since that is still a very popular compressor. But again, you'll see the rotary a lot of times in window units and PTAC units. You'll see the scroll in most residential and light commercial, and most package units these days under 20 tons have the scroll compressors.